Hey guys, it's Miss Elise. Miss you still. I hope that you're staying safe and washing your hands and trying to stay in the house, social distancing. I know it's been a little boring over here. My 10-year-old's going crazy. The toddler's going crazy. She's taking a nap right now, so that's good. But we're just going to talk about some flowering plants today. Just kind of introduce it slow for you since I know you're at home, so let's get started. So here are the notes that you got, and here's the handout. You can fill this out by hand, you can type on it, or you can fill out the Google form. If you're at home, just write on it by hand, and you get to keep one for yourself and then turn one in for us. All right, so I thought I'd break it down for you pretty simple. This wasn't in your PowerPoint notes that we printed for you, but I just kind of wanted to explain it to you really quick. So you have your plants, and they're going to get divided into two basic categories. So you have vascular and non-vascular. Non-vascular means that there is no tube. So if you remember when we talked about cardiovascular system, your cardiovascular system was your heart and your blood and how your blood transports everything. So vascular just kind of means tube. So your cardiovascular system has veins and arteries. So a vascular plant is one that's going to have tubes in it. A non-vascular plant is one that's not going to have tubes in it. So a non-vascular plant, since it doesn't have tubes, if it absorbs water in the roots, there's no tubes to transport it up to the leaves and the flowers. So this is going to limit your plant if it doesn't have tubes. They're going to be very low to the ground, and every cell of the plant has to be able to absorb its own water, its own sunlight, and make its own food. So you're not going to really have huge massive roots because they can't get their food if they're underground. So it's going to be mosses, very small plants that are going to stay close to the water, so like your moss. A vascular plant is going to be one that has tubes. So these can actually grow off the ground because we can transport water from the roots up to the highest part of the plant. So which of these do you think evolved first? Non-vascular plants or vascular plants? Well, non-vascular plants came first. Then we evolved a vascular system, so then plants could start growing. All right, so after that, we had seedless plants. So all of your non-vascular plants are going to be seedless. So once vascular evolved, then you just had seedless plants that were growing tall. So this is going to be like your ferns, and they don't have any seeds. They usually have things like spores that allow the kind of like fungi that allow them to reproduce, but they're not going to drop seeds. And then you have your seed plants, angiosperms and gymnosperms. So any type of plant that has a seed, which is most of the ones you see here in Paris. You're going to have angio, which angio is like Angie. She's beautiful. She's going to be flowers and fruits and then Jim over here. Jim is like rough and tough Jim. And so he's going to be like, give me my pine cones. And he's going to be all of your, like your nuts, like pecans, peanuts, all of those kinds of things. So that's going to be gymnosperms, kind of rough and tough, but again, has seeds. Angiosperms are going to be your flowers and fruits and very feminine, kind of, is how I remember them. So what we're going to focus on is the angiosperms and how the structure of the angiosperms are. So remember, angiosperms are vascular. They're going to have tubes. They're going to have seeds, and they're going to have fruit and flowers. So that's what we're going to focus on today. All right, so again, classification. We've gone over taxonomy and how we classify things into kingdoms, phylum, class, all the way down to a species. So plants has their own classification just like animals do. So we're going to group them and probably into these categories: vascular, non-vascular, seeds or no seeds, flowers or no flowers. So the first classification is that we are talking about the plant kingdom. The PowerPoint that you were given had just bacteria all in one group because they are very similar. But remember, we did sort them into two kingdoms here a couple years ago, and so they are trying to break those two apart. All right, so major plant parts. You have your roots, your flowers, your leaves, your stems, and your seeds of an angiosperm. You've learned these since first, second, third grade, so this should be pretty easy. Hopefully you kind of knew the functions without looking. So, but A right here is this structure. And this is a pretty basic picture of this structure because these structures can come in many different shapes and many different forms. So A obviously is going to be your flower. And so I put some flower pictures there to kind of show you some different types of flowers you can have. You can have tubular flowers, dense head. Even some of your flowers are spike flowers. They can be irregular shape. So if you take Miss Desmond's class for CTE, she's got a lot of different flowers that you get to look at in the greenhouse, and you learn about all the parts. So a lot of you probably already know this if you've got Miss Desmond. But the basic function of the flower, and I've told Maddie since she was little, when you see flowers, the plant's saying basically, hey, it's time to make a baby. So anytime you see flowers, the whole purpose of a flower is for the plant's reproduction. So if the tree doesn't have any flowers on it, then it's not reproducing at that point. It's probably growing the babies and getting seeds ready to distribute. When the trees or bushes have flowers like roses, then you're gonna see that they're actually, hey, let's cross-pollinate or self-pollinate and actually produce that baby. So what is the purpose of a flower? Well, you've got a whole bunch of different ones, and these are from Miss Desmond, so a lot of you have probably seen these before, but you've got like your celosia and all kinds of different types of flowers, but you can see how different they are. So this flower is a lot different than, let's say, this more basic flower that we're used to seeing with the petals. And then you've got this cute little purple flower here. And all of them are different colors and different shapes. This one's one of my favorites. Okay, that flower looks kind of flat. Again, lots of different colors. Then you've got more like these flowers here, where you've got lots of different, like a composite flower, where there's lots of different flowers in one little bunch. Sorry, I'm trying to get it on the camera. So there's types of flowers, and they all smell different, and so what that does is the different colors help us attract pollinators. They smell, some of them smell, and that also is to attract pollinators like bees and birds or even humans, because when we stick our nose in there, we might get some pollen on our nose, and then we go to a different flower and we smell it, and we might drop that pollen. So we're actually helping those flowers reproduce. Wind can reproduce, help with reproduction. Again, birds and bees. So you have all different types of pollinators, and those flowers' purpose is to attract the pollinators. Some of them make nectar to attract different pollinators. And another purpose or function is to protect male and female reproductive organs. So I only put one line on there, and that was probably my fault. I probably should have put a different line on there. But we're going to do and I'm going to actually type attract. Let's see if I can do this better. It's my first time. Attract pollinators. So we can do that, remember, with smell or color or even nectar. And I probably should put flower here. And if you want to go ahead and add that second function, I didn't put it on but it protects the reproductive organs. And we are going to learn about those reproductive organs. Again, if you've got Miss Desmond, you've probably already learned about them. But we're going to actually learn about those reproductive... It just went away. We're going to learn about those reproductive organs, and probably maybe next week after you see this video. So it's going to be a while, but we'll go into each of these parts specifically. So all right, so we're going to go to part B, and I'll try to keep that stuff up there next time. All right, so this one is B. Now B can be like a bud of a flower, which you've seen buds of a flower. It's like right before the flower's about to bloom, and you've kind of got these real pretty buds here. So if you keep watering it and taking care of it, you can have more flowers. Okay. But what I'm going to do for number 2 is I'm going to actually call it a seed. Okay. And again, variety of seeds. We eat a lot of seeds. We eat corn, it's a seed. We eat peas, that's a seed. And we eat like sunflower seeds. So sometimes you actually eat the seeds. Bears can eat them, birds can eat them. And so what would be the purpose of eating the seed? Well, a lot of the purpose is they're covered in, sometimes they're covered in a very thick outer covering. And so when you eat it, it actually helps disperse the seed. So one of the most important things that you need to know about a seed is it's the baby. Okay. And plants don't want to drop their baby right underneath them, because then the baby and the mother plant are then fighting for food. Okay. They are competing for resources, water, sunlight. So what plants want to do is they want to get their babies as far away from them as they can. So the seed, we want it to travel. And there's, again, lots of different ways we can do that. We can do it by wind. So maybe they have adaptations where the wind can carry them away from the parent. And you've seen some of these, like the little, when you blow the little dandelions and all the little seeds, they're tiny itty bitty seeds, but all of them fly away, and that's to get them away from the parent. You've got the maple that almost looks like a boomerang and kind of spins away from the parent. Okay, animals. Animals can also disperse them. So what will happen here, and you've seen the burrs, if you've stepped in grass or something and gotten burrs on your sock. So these are going to be where they have adaptations to actually stick to like an animal's fur, and then the animal runs away, and then maybe eventually it falls off the animal. So that would be a type of dispersal. Water can disperse them, so they can actually be carried by water. So coconut's a good example of that, more of a tropical plant. Some of your plants can actually burst and shoot their seeds, which is kind of cool. We're going to watch, when we get to seeds, we'll watch some of those videos where, if you touch a plant, it can actually shoot out its seeds. And that's kind of one of the things we'll talk about is thigmotropism. And then lastly, humans. So humans can disperse seeds where we pick cherries, that have pits in them, the seeds in them. And then we walk off and maybe spit this pit out somewhere else. Or an avocado, the big pit inside of an avocado, we eat the avocado and then we throw the pit away somewhere else. So we can also disperse those seeds away from the parent plant. So B is going to be a seed. So let me see here. And the functions again of a seed. So the baby embryo is inside of a seed. And it's perfect. I wish I should have gotten a peanut. But inside the peanut, if you break it apart, you can actually see this little bitty embryo. We get to seeds, I'll show you pictures. And so the actual big part of the peanut that you eat is just nourishment for the embryo until he can sprout and make his own photosynthesis. So that is kind of like, you have a baby and then you've got all this part around the baby where the baby's growing, and that's going to help the baby nourish. So the same thing in a seed. The seed, little bitty part is the baby, and the rest of the seed, a majority of the seed, is just food and resources for the baby until it can sprout and make its own food through photosynthesis. Again, dispersal, we want the seed to be able to get away from the mom. And if it's like winter and there's not any good soil or there's no sunlight, then that seed also would provide dormancy for the plant until it can get some favorable conditions, maybe good stuff in the soil. All right, so let's go ahead and fill out this part. So B is going to be a seed. And again, your functions. Now I only put 2 functions here on your notes, but one of the biggest ones is its nourishment. of the embryo. And remember, the embryo is just kind of like the baby plant. That's all the embryo means. And then the other big importance of the seed is it actually is going to do dispersal, which means get it away from the mommy so that we are not competing for resources. So that's the importance of the seed. All right, so let's move on to the letter C. Now, C is going to be your leaf, okay? And the cool thing about plants is not only is their flowers and seeds have a tons of variety, colors, shapes, but their leaves have tons of variety. And so here's the deal. The flowers that I have, yes, if you really look at the shape of these leaves, they all are going to be different. So they're very smooth on the top because that would be the cuticle. It helps water kind of run off, but it also keeps water from escaping. And then the bottom usually doesn't have as waxy of a cuticle. So this one kind of, if you look at it, see if I can get close, kind of has ridges and spikes on the edges of it. And so you got smaller ones, bigger ones on that plant. Now this one has bigger leaves. Okay, so the leaves are a lot bigger than the last one. Doesn't have the spikies on the edges of the leaf. Again, not as waxy on top. This one doesn't feel as smooth on top. This one actually feels like it's a little bit rougher on top and bottom. So this one's obviously not as worried about losing water because it's not as waxy. But a lot bigger. And then, let's see, this one, see the shape? The shape of this leaf is a lot different than the last shape of the last leaf. Still very big. This one's a little bit more waxy on top, which means it's smooth, not waxy on bottom. So, and this leaf color, let me see, I'm gonna do something bad. I'm gonna pick the leaves off so you can actually see. All right, but you can see that the shape is different, and not only is the shape different, but the color of the leaves are different. So I encourage you to go outside and pick some leaves. Now in class, we would have gone out, I would have sent you out to grab 1 or 2 leaves, and then you would have brought them to school and we would have looked at them underneath the microscope, which is really cool, and seen the difference in the leaves. And we would have talked about, okay, if you picked it against the wall or if you picked it in direct sunlight, how does that affect the difference of the leaf? And we will talk about that when we get to leaves further. But it's important that you know that leaves are all shaped different. If you go pick one off a tree and pick one off a flower and a bush, they're going to look different. And it has to do with their adaptations. How worried are they about losing water? A desert leaf is going to be a lot different than a tropical rainforest leaf. So there are some examples of leaves. And here's some more examples in size, so you can have different size. So why is a leaf so important to a plant? Why is it bad to pick all the leaves off like I just did if you picked all the leaves off of a plant? So the biggest function of the plant is it's actually going to be the part of the plant that does photosynthesis. So really any part of the plant that's green is going to do photosynthesis, but the leaves are huge. So you have green stems sometimes, and they also do photosynthesis, but the leaf does it way more efficient than the stem does it. So that's why it's really important to have leaves. So what happens to a tree when it loses all its leaves? Well, like in the winter, if a perennial tree, which is going to come back next year, loses all of its leaves, it's because it's stored up enough food to get through the winter until the favorable conditions can turn, and then the leaves can come back and it can be doing more photosynthesis. All right, also the function of the leaf is this is where we're going to exchange gas, kind of like our respiratory system exchanges gas. The leaves have to breathe too, okay? Now, the thing about the leaves is they're not going to have little mouths on it where you see them go, but there are microscopic mouths that you can't see, that you could see underneath a microscope. And those little mouths are going to actually close if it's they're maybe not needing oxygen or carbon dioxide, excuse me. They don't really need oxygen, they need carbon dioxide. Or if it's scared of losing too much water, it'll close the mouth, but they can open as well. And again, talk about that when we get to the leaves. So C, we are going to type leaves or leaf, and then your function. Okay, so your biggest function is photosynthesis, and your other function is to exchange gases. So that just means we want to take in CO2, that's what gas exchange is for a plant, and breathe out oxygen. Okay, so they're opposite of us. Remember, we breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2. Plants breathe in CO2 and breathe out their waste, which is oxygen. So those are your functions of a plant. Of a leaf, excuse me. And D. All right, so D is obviously pointing to the stem. And you can see the buds coming off of this stem. And on this picture, you can see that it's got more of a smooth stem. And then you've got like your woody stems, which are going to be a little bit more rough, and they have more buds coming out. So a herbaceous stem is usually like, more of your green stems or flowering stems. And then you've got your woody stems, which are going to come from trees or maybe bushes. And so different types of stems. And then my favorite is modified stems. And so this one is usually kind of what we refer to as vegetables. Okay. So when you're trying to tell the difference between a fruit and a vegetable, the main characteristics is if you're eating the seed or around the seed, then it's a fruit. Okay. If you are eating another part of the plant that has nothing to do with the seed, then it's a vegetable. So if you're eating the stem or the roots, then it's a vegetable. So like a carrot is a root, so it would be a vegetable. Okay, and so this is kind of some examples of things that you may eat that are different parts of the plant that have nothing to do with the seed, and usually the roots or the stems. And so I actually brought you one, and for the life of me, I can't remember what kind of flower this was, but we had planted this a long time ago, and the stem was actually very long, but my husband cut it off. But when we pulled it out, you could see that growing underneath the soil, kind of like that last picture right there, was a humongous root. And I would say that this would be some sort of vegetable. Now, I'm not going to try to eat it, but it almost looks like an onion, okay? So you can see that growing underneath the soil, part of the root was this huge, I guess, bud. And so that would be an example of something different. So this, again, the stem was up here and we cut it off and it had beautiful flowers, very, very tall. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. Should have called Miss Desmond and asked her. All right, so stems. Now, stems of most things we think of, okay, the stem is going to be for structure. Okay, it's kind of like your backbone. So what it's going to do, the stem of most things are going to obviously support the leaves and flowers. So the whole purpose of the stem would be to support the leaves and flowers. So, oh, that's leaf. Don't want that. D is stem. And the function is going to be to support and hold up the leaves and flowers of the plant. Okay. If your flower is laying in the dirt and the stem's not holding it up, can it be pollinated? Can the wind carry the pollen? Can the bees get to it? No. If the leaves are just kind of sagging in the dirt, are they going to be able to do photosynthesis? No. So the stem is pretty important. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about, which you may not realize, is the stem transports water and minerals. And we'll talk about how it does that when we get to stem specifically, and we'll look at some examples of what it looks like inside the stem. But basically, there's these little tubes, vascular tubes, that go up the stem, and they transport water up from the roots, and they transport food down from the leaves to the roots to feed the roots, because they obviously can't get sunlight and do their own photosynthesis. And then most of your stems can store food and minerals like through winter. Maybe a tree, its stem, all the woody part, that woody stem is going to store food and minerals through winter until the plant can make its own food. So that would be an example of stems. All right, so let's go ahead and go to roots. Now, again, there's lots of different types of roots that you can have, and we will look at them more next week when we go over roots, but you can have lots of different types of roots. So these are going to be more fibrous, but they're pretty thick fibrous roots. And fibrous just means that they kind of spread out. And then you can have like a taproot, which is going to be like your carrot. Your carrot's a big old thick taproot, but it's got little hairs maybe coming off of it, fibrous roots coming off of it, little root hairs. But for the most part, a lot of these flowers that we're going to look at are more fibrous. So if I take this part out, you can see all of the roots in there. See all the little roots that are and they're very thin and they're very fibrous roots. So a lot different than this guy, okay, where his roots are thicker and this one's a little bit thinner. So it's going to depend on your plant for what the roots look like. All right, so you can have a primary root like your carrot, fibrous roots. You can have like this guy, a more adventitious root. Aerial roots are pretty neat. We'll look at some pictures of those, and prop roots are really neat too, because those actually come out of the ground and prop the plant up, and I'll show you more pictures of those. So lots of different types of roots. But roots' main thing, and what most of you probably know, is the purpose of the root is to absorb water and other minerals in the soil. So when you fertilize, you're adding minerals to the soil. Now, why does plant need other things besides water? Well, they need nitrogen because they're making sugar, CHO, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, but they need that nitrogen and that phosphorus from the soil to make more DNA, to make more proteins. And so those are the minerals that we're talking about. Those aren't the only minerals they need, but those are important ones. All right, so I'm from West Texas where it's real windy, so the roots are really important there, because if you don't have good roots, then your plant or tree could just fall over every time the wind blew. So it's really important that the roots also hold that plant in the ground. And then the last thing they can do is, again, they can also store food for the plant, maybe through winter, or if the plant is, it rains a lot in the desert, and so they're able to build up a whole bunch of glucose during that rain, and then, it doesn't rain in the desert because we don't get a lot of rain. So we're going to store as much of that food as possible because we don't know when it's going to rain again in the desert. So that would be another important function of the roots, is to store that food for later use because it may not rain in the desert for months. So those would be your functions of your roots. So that is it for the basics of the plant. Super easy. Again, stuff you should already know. I hope this makes you a little bit more excited about learning about the individual parts and going into the stem and looking at what it looks like inside the stem and learning some more vocabulary on a deeper level. But we will see you next week. And again, text your teacher, email your teacher. Let us know if you have any questions, because I know it's hard to do distance learning. We miss you guys. We hope you're staying safe, and I hope to see you soon.